So hello to all watching and welcome to Cedarwood Faces. This is episode 10. We have done 10 episodes now of this series, and today we're speaking with Terry Young, good friend, pastor, speaker, and director of the Message Trust Northeast Hub in Middlesbrough, and looking forward to hearing all about that and lots of other areas of that Terry's working in throughout the next bit of time on this chat. So as usual, the aim of these conversations are to get to know people and the organisations and supporters involved in partnering with Cedarwood Festival in 2021 and beyond, of course. If you do have any questions, do ping them through to the live chat. And as ever, if you want to subscribe, keep up to date with all the plans for Cedarwood Festival, both this year and beyond, and the latest online events and news. Be sure to subscribe, follow all our channels at Cedarwood Festival. But without further ado, welcome Terry to the chat, and to give our viewers a bit of context, where in the world, where in the planet are you calling from today?
Right, well, I'm based on Teesside in the north of England, up in Middlesbrough, which was sunny for a while, but it's got a bit overcast. But hey, God always shines on Teesside, so I can't complain too much there.
Good stuff, Terry. Well, good to have you on with us today. As with all our conversations, we kind of like to get a bit of an overview to start with, and then dig a bit deeper into some of the key areas that may be of interest to people in the region and beyond, and talk a bit about ministry, how you came to do what you're doing now, bit about the organisation you're working with.
Yeah.
In this case, it's the Message Trust. We're looking forward to hearing about that. A few questions come in from people who've emailed in, and then we're also going to talk naturally about Cedarwood Festival and how you guys are going to be engaging with that both this year and beyond, and then we'll talk a bit at the end about how we can pray for you and your ministry and everything that's going on. So as we kick off, you're calling in from sunny Teesside, and where, for those who are kind of specific to the northeast and who do know Teesside well, we know that it's a large area. So where specifically are you calling in from? Maybe not the address of the home street or anything, but for those who want to try and find you. But apart from that, just kind of whereabouts you live?
Yeah, I live in Middlesbrough. Lived in Middlesbrough all my life. I did 1 year in Scotland, but the rest of my life I've always been rooted and based in Middlesbrough.
Wow, cool. 1 year in Scotland. We're looking forward to hearing about why that blip. Why that head north. What happened there? But yeah, it's cool. So why don't you kick off, Terry, with kind of a 30,000 view of kind of your life and how you've got to where you are now, and just some of the key points for our viewers to just understand a bit about you and the ministry.
Okay. So like I said, I've been born and bred on Teesside all my life. Grew up in a Catholic family, but non-church. Had a big encounter with Billy Graham mission in 1984, came to faith. But what I found myself was moving into the chemical industry. So Teesside has a very big, large chemical industry based around the different areas around here. And so I found myself working for ICI back in the day. And I basically lived my whole working life in ICI for, it must have been about 30 plus years in that. Now, obviously, I'm working through my faith journey while I'm working in the chemical industry. And I can just touch on why I found myself in Scotland, because it was a bit of a miracle. ICI at the time did something what they called was an adult development scheme. And that meant, because they employed about 30,000 people, I let 6 people a year do a little project. My manager came and asked me would I be interested in applying for it. So there I was in a control room in a chemical plant, and I said, I'd like to go to Bible college with my family. And he looked at me, he says, well, something you're interested in. There's a qualification, there's training, fill in the form. Sure enough, I filled in the form, and lo and behold, 3 weeks later, I get the phone call. I've got permission to go.
Wow.
So I went to Scotland. ICI, as a chemical company, paid me full wage for a year with shift allowance, with condition money, with bonuses, and give me £3,000 towards my fees to go. And so my wife and I and my 3 children at the time, we all went to Scotland in the borders to King's Bible College, where we were there for a year. Then I came back, picked up my original job, and stayed in the company. What that training enabled me to do was really grow in my faith, but also in the functionality within local church. And I joined a local leadership team of the home church I was in, which was Middlesbrough Community Church, eventually becoming senior leader for about 8 years. I was leading the team. Then we handed the leadership over, and I moved across to the church I'm in now, which is Tees Valley Community Church, while still staying in the chemical industry, and found myself progressing through the industry in different job roles, and ultimately got myself into a shift manager role. So I was holding that down while still involved with leadership within local church. Joined TVC church, where I took up responsibility looking after all their what we call Eden teams, which are part of the message ministry. And that got me connected in with the Message Trust as an organization. And in 2019, in November, I left the chemical industry and moved into a full-time position as a Northeast regional leader for the Message Trust across the Northeast of England. The irony for me was, when I was at school, there was 2 exams I got unclassified for in my qualifications. One of them was chemistry and the other was religion. And they're the 2 things my life has been shaped by: working in the chemical industry and leading churches and functioning Christian ministry.
Wow.
That's where I got myself where I am. We threw an extra 4 children in on that, so we've got 7 children now. Well, we didn't throw them in, but you know what I mean. We've got 4, so we've got 7 children, 4 grandchildren, and loving life.
Well, Terry, what a amazing overview. A lot to dig in there. Yeah, amazing, and 7 children. That's a huge achievement, to say the least. But I mean, the thing I found amazing as well was just hearing about the 2 miracles that seemingly have happened. One is obviously coming to faith along the way. You know, we all know that's a miracle when Christ kind of meets us where we are. And we're going to hear a bit more about that in a second, a bit more of a personal how that happened. And then on top of that, the fact that you got unclassified in those 2 areas and ended up doing that just shows that God will work in the ways that He wants, rather than what the world will naturally say.
Yeah, well, I said to my children, don't complain about you. Be careful what subjects you complain about at school. You might find investing the rest of your life in them.
Wow. Well, that's awesome, Terry. Thanks so much for sharing that kind of overview. As we've heard a bit about your kids, obviously, and I'm guessing they're just spread all over the UK at the moment. Some are based close by, maybe.
Yeah, I've got a daughter in London, a son in Cardiff, a son in Newcastle, a daughter in Manchester, and everybody else lives still on Teesside.
So you've got plenty of spaces if you need to stay anywhere around the country.
Oh, yeah.
You've strategically positioned them well. So that's awesome. And in terms of one of the things we like to ask some of the people who come on, Terry, is it's often when we're speaking in different places, myself and you probably in church or other contexts, there's often not much chance to actually share how we came to Christ and how we came to know that, you know, how we came to know Jesus as not just our Savior, but our Lord of our life as well. And so just want to give kind of a few minutes just for you to share with some of the people watching now, but also some of the people who are going to watch this further down the line, how Terry, how you know, God encountered you or how you encountered God. You know, whether obviously for some people that's a moment, but some people it's a journey throughout life. And so I just wonder if you'd share a few minutes on that and give our listeners a bit on that.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a Catholic family. Well, but we weren't a functioning Catholic family, so I was just in the Catholic schooling system, so non-church attendance. Then I got a girlfriend called Anne, who her family were quite active in the Catholic Church, and so when we were about, I was 18, she was 16, and we were together at that point. And her uncle had an encounter with God and come to faith. and he joined a local Anglican church. And so her and her family used to look on him as being a bit of a religious nut, to be honest, at the time. And I remember one day I was walking from our town centre with Anne, and this is in 1984, and up on the wall on the side of a building was this big poster of Billy Graham's face, and it said, "Billy Graham worth listening to." So I said to her, "Oh, you'll definitely be going to see him, won't you?" And to be honest, I was really trying to sort of tease her about it, thinking as a Catholic, she'll react against this idea of an American evangelist. She had no idea who he was, so it totally fell flat on her face. I took her home. I went to my house. That night, she phoned me up and she said, "Oh, do you know that Billy Graham you were on about on the way back from town?" I went, "Oh, yeah." She said, "Well, my uncle Michael has come round and his church are taking coach loads of people to go and see him in Sunderland at the football stadium. And my mum's got you a ticket." Well, at that, because Anna thought I wanted to see him. So at that point, there was a big bust up on the phone, and some choice words were had, I would say, to the point that I put the phone down. Anyhow, about an hour later, the phone rings, and this voice, which was Anne, was saying "Hello, do you love me?" "Yes, I love you." "Do you know, would you do anything for me?" "Yes, I will." She said, "Well, will you please come to Billy Graham? My mum and dad think you go to church and they think you're a good Catholic lad. And so that's why they've got you a ticket. Will you come?" So I said, "Okay, I will go," reluctantly. So I remember then sat on this coach going on a rainy Wednesday night, May the 30th, to this football stadium. And we walked in and the place was full. And the singing was going on. And I found myself clapping to some of the songs. Why I was doing that at the time, I don't know. And then Billy Graham gave his invitation for people to give their life to him, to the Lord, and said, "Come down to the front if you want to make yourself a decision for Jesus." And me, Anne, and her two brothers and sisters all stood up, walked down to the front, give our lives to the Lord. And so then when I'm driving back that night, I started thinking, did I just do that because everybody had done it in that massive crowd? So I said to Anne, I want to come back on the Friday night. We went back on the Friday night, and sure enough, the invite to come forward was given again. That's my son. Yeah. And when the invite was given to come forward, I thought, do you know what? I don't need to respond to that. Don't need to respond to it. I had made that decision on the Wednesday night. And at that point, me and Anne began a faith journey. Anne became my wife, became the mother of the children. And we've travelled in faith together since then.
Amazing, Terry. Yeah. And it's really interesting that you went and kind of challenged your own mind, that second time. You questioned. I think a lot of people think that it's not about using our minds, our faith journey. And there's love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, and mind. There are many different facets we're given to kind of understand the love of Christ, and some of that is it's really great that you didn't just take it. You actually were like, right, I need to just challenge this and question it, and you did, which was awesome. Well, that's amazing, and that leads beautifully on to one of the other things I was going to say was to obviously we're talking about Cedarwood Festival, and one of the big things that we talk about with all the people that have been on is kind of what impact festivals and these large gatherings have on people, and both myself and you've just shared your one of your stories there as to how this large gathering of 30,000-40,000 people had such an impact, and I wonder if you could maybe share just if there have been other festivals or other large gatherings that have had an impact in your life, or you've seen have impact in other lives that are maybe different from the local church on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So I remember, so this is in the 80s. For those who might be old enough to know this, there was a series of Bible camps back then called the Dales Bible Week. And at that time, my experience in church was very sort of traditional. And so this one day, somebody said, "Oh, there's this camp happening in Harrogate. Can we go, and why don't we go there?" So we got in a car, 2 carloads of us, of these young people in our 18 to 20-year-olds, drove to this field. We got out of our cars, and as we were walking to this, at the time, at this event was a cattle shed, and we could hear this worship going on, and it was worship like I'd never heard before.
Wow.
It was phenomenal. And as we walked in to this cattle shed, we opened the doors, and there was thousands of people worshiping. And I actually thought, man, this is epic. I have found heaven on earth. This was immense. And I just remember being overwhelmed by the sheer scale of all these people worshiping together. Then the guy gets up and says, "Well, welcome everybody. Great worship time. This is our last ever camp that we're doing." And I felt, no, I found heaven and it's been took off me. And then I had to wait for, it must have been about 8 years before I got to my next camp. And I find that there is a dynamic about a festival that allows you to have a pace of life in a way that you connect with people and connect with God that you just can't get outside of them settings. There's just that relaxedness of hanging around, drinking a coffee, speaking about where you've just been, what you've just heard, what you felt God was saying. It just embeds something of a journey of faith in you. You find in a festival that is really, really significant. Far more significant than a Sunday morning gathering. I think it's because when you're away from home, all the day-to-day things get left behind, and you become an open vessel to just hear what God is saying.
Yeah.
In a meeting, but also off your friends and people that you're talking to around a campfire. Powerful times, camps, I think.
Yeah, no, I'd agree, and I think that's been echoed with a lot of the people we've spoken with, Terry. And in fact, one of the reasons that we had the vision, God planted the vision on our hearts to look at gathering the church in the north of England to unite and worship together under one banner, and and come together for that extended time. Because I think that's another word that I want to use, just extended time of worship and fellowship. Sundays are great, and when this is not replacing the festivals, by no means to replace a weekly discipleship and training, but there's definitely a time and a space for that, stepping out of the normal routine and having some extended time of fellowship with people without kind of thinking, oh, the dinner's burning or whatever, and just having that freedom. And I think that's one of the big things. I think on top of that, it's the local church seeing that there's something bigger going on, and seeing that God is working across a region or a larger area rather than just the day-to-day.
I think you're right, because I think there's some churches are big, but there's the vast majority of our churches are numerically quite small, and they can feel quite isolated. And when you, as a Christian, find yourself surrounded by a couple of thousand of Christians, the sense of, I'm in this together. Actually, I'm not this little outpost with not. Do you know what I mean? It really does encourages and builds faith and builds a sense of, actually, God is moving. And you get the chance to hear stories, what God's doing in other places, what lives are getting changed elsewhere, not just about what's on your own patch.
No, I totally agree, Terry. Yeah, and that's really great to hear from your point of view. Kind of moving just a bit backwards before we move forwards again. But in terms of, I really wanted just to touch on, you were working in the secular world, and for many people, they think, oh, I can't be doing ministry unless I'm actually doing full-time ministry, that many people would say is kind of paid ministry and in a church or something. And my view is that, our life and our life is our ministry and our mission field. So talk to us a bit how, you were blessed a miracle to be able to go and study with this support from the secular company. That's amazing. But talk to us maybe a bit how you found kind of that, being part of a church and serving there, but also then feeling that during the week you were serving in your actual business as well.
Yeah. So for me, it's I work full time for a Christian charity now. But most of my life, I've been living out my faith in a non-Christian business world.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally, I loved that environment. There's a realness about working your faith out in a world where
Yeah.
actually you're not in an echo chamber. Everybody isn't going to say yes to what you're saying. And actually it to me, it's like, it's a very it's a great environment to strengthen your faith, because like I look at, for me was like, when you're in a group setting, people will always have a go at somebody for something. It could be what your political views are, what your football team. It doesn't really matter. And so for me, my approach in the working environment, I had no problems people laughing at me, going on at me about my faith. Do you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we all have something that
Mm-hmm.
we're getting challenged on. But the ultimate thing was, ultimately my confidence was in, well, I know God's real, so I'm not the fool in this room,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to express the love of God even when people come at you in different ways, like. Uh, for a lot of the time in my working life, I was in a place of influence. So I was a team leader, shift manager, and therefore I was about assessing and what is God's culture that He wants in this work group. What's God's atmosphere He wants in this
Mm-hmm.
workplace. So my view was always, how can I grow you as a person? What do you want me to do for you? So it was never about myself. It was about other people and wanting to grow them up, but also seeing that actually God has a big heart for the people you're working for.
Yeah.
And you know, I worked in a predominantly male environment, uh, but I've sat in my office with people crying because the marriages fall into pieces. They've got health issues with the children, and being able to be there and be an expression of the love of God in an environment with someone is an important part of it. And I think the gospel works. The gospel isn't irrelevant to the society and culture. What sometimes is how we do church and church language
Mm-hmm.
might be alien, but actually the truth of the gospel is relevant in every culture. And it helps you learn to express the gospel in a language that the people you're working with understand. And I think that was one of the joys I found in work. And do you know what? Day one, you let people know you're a Christian, and then they'll help you walk a holy life.
Yeah.
It's when you step out of line, they'll remind you, well, you shouldn't be doing that. You're a Christian, aren't you?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The best thing is to come clean,
Yeah.
day one,
Yeah.
come out and pronounce yourself to be a Christian, and then just do life, and it's fine. It's
Yeah. No, I can definitely relate to that. When I was at university at Loughborough,
yeah,
down in the Midlands, great university and great experience I had. But I remember very early on, in fact, probably I think the first week, I remember in my mind thinking, now's the time to make the stand. You've got to make it now, or else, you make it halfway through your year, people go, well, what happened to the last year? What happened the last term? Is just this just happened? And for me, someone who went to university as a Christian,
yeah,
it was so important, as you say, to make that stand. And people are always going to then hold you to a standard.
yeah.
But if you don't have that standard, then people don't know what to hold you to. So it's very hard to go back on. It's very
I,
hard
I
to
tell you,
backdate it.
I tell you what, a funny story I had, because what would happen is every 2 or 3 years we used to get a new shift, new operations manager who would be my line manager as shift manager. And this one day I had this new lady had come in as our ops manager, and I'd seen her for a couple of weeks, and then this one day she said, "Oh, call in for a coffee, and we'll just get to know each other, right?" So she sat down there, and she says to me, "Oh, you've got a large family, haven't you?" And I said, oh, yeah. I've got 7
It's
kids.
more than 2, you know.
I've got 7 kids. And she said, oh, don't you have a telly? And I said, well, actually, for most of my married life, I didn't have a telly. You know, she said, it's unusual, isn't it? I said, well, I've got a friend who's got 7 children, but I said, I've got one friend who's got 9 and another who's got 8. And she goes, really? I said, yeah. I said, because to be a part of my cult, you need to have big families. And she went, what? I said, you know, I'm in a cult, don't you? And she looked at me. I said, I'm not in a cult. I'm not in a cult. I said, you know, I'm a person of faith. You know all the answers to the questions you're asking me, and you're doing a good job, but I'm a person of faith. You know that. I says, I'm not in a cult. You don't have to have loads of kids to be in my church. It's just we love birthday cake in our house, so we have lots of kids. But when I said
that is one way to put it, the birthday cake.
when I said to her, "Oh, we're in a cult," she looked at me like this. Yeah, she didn't know where to go with it, but it was just.
No, I think it's so important, Terry, as you said, just being really clean and really open about it. And at the end of the day, is it's our actions that will often portray that, you know, and if so, use words as the saying goes. So yeah, no, that's really cool. It's really cool. I think it's so important for us to know that. So moving on, I want to talk a bit about
Yeah.
your ministry right now, the message trust,
Yeah.
which is who you're working with. For those who are unaware of what that is, obviously there's so many Christian organizations, great Christian
Yeah.
organizations in the UK and overseas. Why don't you just give us a very brief overview of the message trust, where it started, and how, and where you fit within that puzzle?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So about coming up to 30 years ago, a guy called Andy Hawthorne, who is our CEO, him and his brother based in Manchester. They were businessmen, and they wanted to saw loads of young people. They wanted to reach them with the gospel, and they were trying to think of ways to do that. And one of the ways they thought, we'll create a band, and they created a band called Worldwide Message Tribe, for those who are old enough who might remember them, and started going into schools in Manchester and running events around for kids in school and that. And these bands were going really good. And then they realized they wanted to do more than just that. So basically, this is where the message was formed, really, out of this going into schools, with creative bands. And they developed and they created even more ministries, one of them being Eden, which was where they took a load of young people, sent them into a community of urban, and called them urban missionaries, and said, go and live in that community, win people for the gospel. And so these Eden teams started springing up all over Manchester. Then what you got was there was a lot of synergy and excitement and real gospel creativity happening in Manchester under the umbrella of the message. And these then just multiplied out, and we got some double-decker buses and called them message buses, and they were basically community centres on wheels, and went into communities and then run youth clubs and all that, and started leading young people to Christ. Then we moved into social enterprise, and by this time the message as an organization was getting bigger and bigger. So they were opening up like little business units to get people who have come from prison to maybe get some skilling up, and introduced in the discipleship format with skills, and create social enterprise. Then they started doing year out programs, and then we've done prison workers, and gradually everything was just growing and growing and growing. And we saw as an organization that there was a need outside of Manchester.
Mm-hmm.
And they set up some regional hubs, one being the Northeast, where the aim was, rather than Manchester running ministry in regions, let's set up hubs where we can facilitate the ministry out into the regions.
Yeah.
And then really what happened is last year under COVID, due to the food poverty, we really stumbled, but I think it was God given as a model, called community groceries, where we opened up a community grocery and connected into communities where we were addressing food poverty, but also creating wraparound care and Christian engagement through alphas. And so now we have 8 shops across the UK, with the view that by the end of next year we'll have maybe anywhere between 60 to 80 shops opened up. And as a message, we employ a shop manager and an assistant, and we work with a partner church to reach the community. Now, all this happens under the umbrella of us of working in reaching the least, the last, and the lost would be the phrase we would use. So a lot of our activities are in communities that fall under the bottom 10% of the social economic framework. And the idea for us is we want people to encounter Jesus. So mission, gospel-centered mission, is a massive part of what we're about. The prayer is massive, and reaching the poor. And so we want to partner with local churches to help them engage with the communities that they're in through mission, through all these different activities that I've just said there. And
that's amazing.
So my job is in the Northeast. So at the beginning of lockdown, there was 3 of us. There was me, my ops manager, Darren, my schools worker, Joe Wintersladen. Since then, we've brought in another 7 members of staff to help us with the groceries, and we're looking at bringing anywhere between 6 to 8 in by the end of the year. So we've seen a massive growth within the ministry in the Northeast, really.
Amazing, Terry. And so obviously the different hubs in the UK, I can't remember if you mentioned how many hubs were in the UK, but they're all kind of doing different things that are focused on the areas that they're in, that are, feeding the needs of evangelism with the youth in the areas they're in, rather than doing the same thing everywhere, essentially. Is that am I right in that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we would have some core ministries that we try to move out, but then you obviously find, with the context of your own environments, there's different tweaks and ways that works itself out. So we have we have 2 hubs in the Midlands, the East and the West. We have a Yorkshire hub, we have a Northwest hub, we have a London hub, we have Message Wales and Message Scotland operating as hubs into them nations as well.
That's amazing. Wow. And do these hubs work kind of together, or are they quite independent kind of entities?
I mean, they're independent in some respect, although we gather like every 3 or 4 months as hub leaders, share ideas, share best practices, and just really keeping I think it's important. We do, as a message, we do monthly prayer days. So prayer is such an important part of the message that basically we're paid to go to Manchester 1 day a month to pray for all the ministries that we're doing, because what we want to do is we want to build this on the power of God moving in regions. So it's not just, you can be creative, you can be innovative, but ultimately we want to be a people of the Spirit and say, God, if you don't step in, we can't actually deliver this. And therefore prayer is foundational. Hence we pull people in once a month to the center.
That's awesome, Terry. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about firstly, it's amazing to hear about the pivoting, responding to the context of where you are, and hearing, I mean, we've talked about this off air, the kind of the amazing work of this community grocery. I know Andy Hawthorne was kind of sharing about it online the other day, how that's really gone from strength to strength. But which is phenomenal. In this time we're hoping to come to the end of the global pandemic. At the moment, we're in June in 2021 as this is being recorded. But it really is just amazing to hear how the message, and I think it's fair to say a lot of partner organizations are really kind of have clubbed together to make this happen. And it's just amazing to see the church responding in that way. And I think that kind of leads beautifully into the kind of rounded ministry that you guys run, which is you mentioned working in schools with the likes of Joe and Darren as well, supporting. So how long have those 2 been on board? And specifically Joe, obviously he's working kind of on the front line in schools. Tell us a bit about that.
Okay, so Darren joined the same time as I did in November 2019. And Darren, me and Darren, we go back 30 years. So we know what we're both good at, and we know what we're not good at. And
so for those who are just joining us, that means Terry's at least 35. Okay. So let's move on from that now.
Yeah. And then you've got Joe. Joe was working for the message running Respect Me into schools before we started the regional hub. And that was one of them elements where Manchester was reaching out of
Yeah,
itself. And really what we needed to do was get some of these ministries based in a regional hub
yeah,
just so we could get the best out of them and get them properly looked after. And so Joe wasn't just like stuck in the far end of the messages regions, but there was no one caring for him and helping him get the best out of what he's done. So Joe's been working for the message probably on and off for about 3 years, doing Respect Me. And so in Respect Me, he's gone into schools. Obviously, pandemic shut down some schools and they're starting to open up again, which is great. But leading up to the pandemic, he was hitting about 12,000 students a year. He was getting in access to bringing in the Respect Me element. And Respect Me, for those who don't know, would be a 5-layer program that we offer secondary schools, with each year has a tailored program to that age specific group. And the idea would be is Joe would go into that school and speak to all year groups through that rolling program.
wow. It's amazing that, hearing about the different facets and different offerings that the message does offer, not just kind of in the community, but then in schools and through these other areas. So, yeah, really cool, Terry. Thanks for explaining that to our listeners. So, in terms of, we've talked about some of the projects that you guys are involved in, the grocery, the other initiative, Respect Me, and I wondered if there's, as we've talked about, COVID, we're in it right now. I wonder if you could share any kind of positive stories that you've heard from this time, that the message, this last year, all the churches and organizations have really been, adjusting a lot
Yeah.
to this situation. I wonder if there are any stories, success stories, stories of hope that we can be encouraged by.
Yeah. Well, I think what we've found is incredible openness to the gospel. So as we've opened up 3 groceries in the northeast in the last 6 months. Now, every time we open one up, I'm for a good few days, I'm around that, very hands-on, getting involved with the setup. But part of what I like doing is beginning to engage with the people coming in who are visiting. And when we opened the one up in Redcar recently, so the shop itself was slightly set off the road. So I was stood at the entrance driveway, just talking to people coming past, inviting them in to come and have a look at the grocery. And what amazed me is on the way out, people just saying, "This is amazing. Thank you for what you're offering." You don't realize that actually I've just lost my job. I've just somebody was saying is my son's seriously ill, and this has just been a lifeline to us. And they were allowing us to pray with them there and then.
Mm,
It was just like there is an openness, I think, through the pandemic, that people have almost like there's like a cloud lifted off people where they're willing to be prayed for, spoken life into.
yeah,
And we've had numerous every day, every week, each grocery sends in a good news stories from that week, and they're constantly full of people praying for people in the shop, people crying in the shop because they've never experienced such support and encouragement. And if you go to, obviously the one in Manchester was the very first one we did. Their Christmas, what they did is they invited all the members, because you become a member of the grocery to access the food. So they put on a Christmas party in a car park for all the members, and they invited everybody who's a member to come to this, and they had a few hundred. I'm not sure how many ultimately they had, but at that Christmas party, Andy Hawthorne gave a gospel call. and 160 people made a decision to begin inquiring more about faith. I'm not going to say 160 people become Christians.
Exactly.
But 160 people said,
Yep.
I'm up for finding out more.
Which is amazing.
Do you know what I mean? And the thing is, to me, it's like, it is the parable of the sower, where you scatter seeds, right? So it's like when I went to Billy Graham. Is everybody who went the front still walking with Jesus? Well, I'd be surprised if they are. But you know what I am? I am. And therefore, 160 people put the hand up to respond for a more journey in the faith. I can guarantee at least 20 of them will be full on walking with God, if not more. And that's just out of opening up a food shop and connecting people in and telling people how important they are and putting a service on for them and giving them access to connecting with other things. And that's getting replicated more and more out. The stories are growing. So when you open up a shop, it's a proper community shop. You begin to start knowing people by first name. And that framework and that climate of faith and prayer is producing disciples along the way. And some people have been discipled before they come to faith.
Yep.
Do
No, I mean, I think that's amazing, Terry. I just want to echo to our listeners, that fact that, if you don't plant any seeds, there's not going to be any harvest. But if you plant some seeds, there's going to be at least the chance to have some harvest. And I think often we discount this, this thing of this negativity of, someone might not say yes, or someone might not, accept my invitation to come to Alpha or whatever. And I think that one of the we were chatting to one of my good friends, Phil Knox, just recently, and Roy Crown, another good friend who was on here, and we were saying, the power of the invitation. If he hadn't been invited to something, then then all of us can actually testify to someone inviting us, and that's a testament in itself. And I think that we've had obviously a number of people, specifically related to Cedarwood. There's been a number of people that have shared their concerns, and I remember one person saying, it's not just to worship and to share the gospel. That's not good enough reason to gather all these people. And I said, well, at the end of the day, I've got to disagree, because it only takes one person to hear, and you can't ever you can't ever control what God does with that. Do you know what I mean? We don't want to box him in, and so I'm so excited about seeing people come together at Cedarwood Festival and hear experiences of the youth encountering Christ, and the children and the adults and people who wouldn't normally even hang out together.
Well, you know what? The story I often talk about, and I can't remember his name now. If I was about to do a talk somewhere, I'd get his name.
You'd have his name. You'd have his name.
But it's the old farmer who doesn't know what to do, and he has a tractor, and he goes round the farms, and there's somebody got a tent meeting going on somewhere, and he goes round and picks up people, puts them on this truck, takes them to the tent meeting. And one of them was a 14-year-old guy called Billy Graham. And then Billy Graham he's the gospel, gets saved. 1984, he's preaching the gospel. I get saved. I get saved because somebody got on a truck and said, who wants to come to a camp? Who wants to come to a camp? Climb on my tractor and I'll take you there. And you think of all the lives, for example, Billy Graham's touched because of this man who said, who wants to come to this? Get on the tractor. I think what happens for me is the kingdom of God is not like a business. It's not like a business. We start doing all our balance sheets and we say, if we don't get this return, it's not worth it. But you know what? You're talking about people. You're talking about legacies. You're talking about like somebody gets saved, they walk in a journey of Jesus with Jesus. Their kids get brought up in a godly household. Them kids have kids. You talk about a generational legacy when people come to faith. You can't put it on a balance sheet.
It's a different economy. It's a different economy. It's a different economy. Yeah, no, well, thanks for sharing that, Terry. Yeah, some amazing stories. Just hearing there from Terry about this community grocery and many other things that have been going on during COVID. But we're going to now just shift our attention to Cedarwood Festival.
Yeah,
Um, Terry, it's been great. We've obviously known each other a while and been in touch about Cedarwood as well and how the message can engage. Um, Obviously, there's been setbacks along the way with Cedarwood Festival, but we know we're not averse to that, and we know that there's always going to be that moving forward. But we're pressing on, and to everyone who's listening and have maybe listened to other conversations we've had, there will be news very shortly coming out about the plans for Cedarwood Festival 2021 and what that's going to look like. It's going to be different to normal. It's not going to be a 3-day event, but there will be something happening. And we're very excited then to push on to 2022, where there will be the hope of a full 3-day gathering of God's people in the north of England. So in terms of Cedarwood itself, just in general, Terry, and without focusing too much on this year,
yeah.
I'd love just to hear just about some of the ways in which the message are going to be involved from you, and then why you'd want to be involved in this
Yeah.
as an organization as well.
Yeah. So one of the things that we thought we would like to do with the young people at Cedarwood in 2022 in particular is we do something called Youth Advance, and Youth Advance is a ministry we do where young people are trained and mentored to go and share the gospel out with their peers, and almost like, so rather than us focusing on Christian youth being how do we protect them from taking drugs and sleeping with people, actually no, we want to say Christian youth can be empowered disciples who want to take the good news of Jesus to their friendship groups and their neighbors. And so we do something called Youth Advance. And as part of Youth Advance, we do something called the scattering. And that would be once a year, we get our Youth Advance groups together and they do maybe 6 to 8 days together and do some worship, some training, and then go and do some mission together. So one of the things that we thought about Cedarwood would be great to see this Youth Advance bring the scattering to the young people of Cedarwood in the festival. And the plan would be that, for the 3 days that we're together in our youth sessions, then we'd have a team of people who would actually be just inputting in them, helping them young people to see this is how you can share your faith. This is why it's good for you to share your faith, and equipping the young people at the event to be people who can go out and share their faith. Now,
Yeah.
also within the context of that, we will always give opportunity for people to be offered the chance to respond to the gospel, because likewise, I'm aware that when you have a gathering like that, not everybody who'll be there will be a Christian. So there is that potential of people coming to faith in that setting, but we want to particularly focus on getting them equipped to take the gospel out. And then one of the things that we want to do is almost give an option for the young people to post Cedarwood come on a 2 or 3 day mission event in the northeast, where they'll be took out. Probably they'll be sleeping on church hall floors or something like that, and doing 2 or 3 days mission into some of the communities around the northeast of England. And it's to say, do you know what? This isn't about entertaining young people. This is about realizing that God wants to take hold of these young people and call them on an adventure of faith. And out of the gathered community at Cedarwood, we'll then send some out. Will all of them go? Maybe not. But we believe what's done on Cedarwood at the festival will add value to the young people anyhow. But I think anybody who opts to do the extra 2 days, 3 days on the end are going to get another level of, and it's almost like Cedarwood plus youth scattering into the communities. So
That's amazing. Yeah. So it's that equipping. It's that equipping, isn't it? It's there's the practical and there's the spiritual aspect there as well. Yeah.
And I think so you picture this, if you're an adult watching this now and you've got some young people you want to bring to this festival, do you know what? You can have some stories to tell. after the festival. The stories can be, well, one, as a young person, they learned how to share their faith. Two, I met some great people. Three, I had an encounter with God. Can you imagine if the fourth is, and we went out and I led people to Jesus? I saw people who were lost get found. And so you sense that faith adventure.
Amen.
And if you're 14, 15-year-old, and then you've got faith adventures, it sets you up wonderful to the excitement. The idea of gospel mission being for like the 20 pluses, it's just, we're missing the point. Too often church ministries focused on, purely focused on, and this is important still, care, but we do it in a way of trying to protect our young people from drugs and sex. And actually, if you want to protect them from drugs and sex, let them be on fire for the gospel. That will protect them, because they'll want something else.
Yeah.
Because if you're just protecting them, as soon as you stop protecting them and they'll go off to university, they'll make all them choices. But we want to give them something else that calls them up to something, some discipleship that really equips them to go out and live out their faith and see their friends won for Jesus.
That's amazing, Terry. And I know at the heart of the message, trust, and Andy Hawthorne, know Andy well, and at the heart of that and all this mission is the desire as well to see people come to Christ, and also to do that in a way where we're understanding and working with the whole body of Christ.
Yeah.
And I think it brings nicely on to the fact that Cedarwood is for all denominations, it's for all ages, it's for all expressions, and we want to say that people are welcome. People are welcome to come, and they're welcome to come, and whether they're a youth or an adult or even a child. And to that end, maybe you can mention some of the, because we're going to be having tons of different partners who are coming alongside the Message Trust. I just wondered if you can mention some of the conversations you've been having about the possible partnerships that you guys maybe going to have with this project as well.
Yeah. So we're in the conversation with YWAM. They've got a base up in the north now, and we want to see how that partnership working together, because the thing is, and again, there's something nice about going away with your own set of church. Purely, there is something nice about that. But you know what? There's massive blind spots when you do that. But when you gather with God's people in the broader sense, there's a richness of community that allows us to think, do you know what? This call to take the gospel to the ends of the earth is possible if we do it together. If we only focus on our own way of doing stuff, we'll alienate so much of the potential out there. And so one of the things is, that's why it's great we're meeting up with the YWAMers from Newcastle, just to discuss how we can mesh with them and partner with them at Cedarwood to give a really broader experience of how we get this gospel out there, and realizing that we need to work together. If we keep just doing our own thing, we will do our own thing. But if we work together, we end up doing God's thing. Because the picture God paints is always bigger than your world. It's always bigger. And if you don't expose yourself to anything bigger than your world, you're limiting your perspective of God moving. And you know what? I have a preference of how I do church. Do you know what I mean? But that's my preference. It isn't God's preference.
Yeah.
I mean,
And it's not the only way, is it? It's a way.
Yeah. God's committed to the church, and I have a preference of how I do church. But actually, I have to be careful to make sure my preference isn't the assumption that I'm the only one doing it this way. And I have a massive blind spot if I start thinking like that. So being there, when we were chatting, just meeting the other day when we were up in the forest with you, David, and met the team that were working there, the breadth of church experience and Christian heritage that all represented.
It's beautiful.
It is. It's in. You know what? If we lose sight of that, we lose sight of a lot, really.
No, I totally agree, Terry. Yeah, well, thanks for those insights, and we're really excited about having the message and YWAM, and in fact many of the other partners that we're going to be having at Cedarwood Festival, both this year and beyond. And just as we're wrapping now, Terry, I wanted just to draw our attention and draw our viewers and listeners' attention to how they can be praying for the Message Trust specifically, and maybe your team as well. Obviously, you've mentioned some of those initiatives, the grocery and obviously the plans for Cedarwood Festival. But I wonder if you could just share some of maybe the top 3 prayer points that you could share for our viewers and listeners to take away.
Okay, so from the first thing, and this is a slightly selfish in a godly sense, if you can be. So obviously, I've mentioned that we in the Northeast have expanded quite a lot through COVID, but one of them challenges is the teams increased, but not all the team know each other because they haven't had a chance to have genuine connection because of COVID. So one of the prayers that I would love for people to carry for us in the next 12 months is that sense of team really develops right across the Northeast. So I connect with everybody in my role, but there's some people who've hardly ever met because one's in Hexham, one's in Redcar, and because of COVID, getting them together. We're just in July going to have our first team meeting and getting everybody together. So that's a big thing for me because I think the richness of that variety of team working together will facilitate growth. That's one thing. I think the other thing would be is to pray for in the coming months is the increase that we're having. So we've just sat down, done our budgets, and our budgets for next year will be twice as much as it was this year because we're pretty much doubling up on everything. So my prayer would be ask you to pray for a release of finances for us as the message in the Northeast to do the things that we do, because the things that we do are partnering with local churches. So if we open up another shop, that's with a local church. It's reaching a community. It's actually, we're facilitating mission. That's what we want. So when we're increasing, it's all about facilitating mission. And 2, I think.
3.
Sorry, yeah. And thirdly, I would pray that ask you to pray that God would stir up some young people to come to Cedarwood in 2022 and to sign up for the mission on the end of it as well. So the experience
amazing
of this is an adventure. So I want for young people to see Cedarwood 2022 as a real massive adventure in faith that will shape them for their future, not just for the 3 days that they're there.
That's amazing, Terry. Thanks so much for those prayer points, and I'm sure people will take them away. We will be holding those as a team as well. But from us, that is a wrap for this episode of Cedarwood Faces. Thank you to our guest, Terry, for joining us today. To find out more about the message and the work that is done through that in the UK, but also in the Northeast, links will be below in the description, and you can find out or contact Terry to find out more about that after this as well. But finally, thank you to our listeners, subscribers, Festival Network, and beyond for joining us. Look forward to next time, and until then, God bless and stay safe.
God bless you.
There we go. Great. Done.